Hi guys, I'm just another guy named James, and today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite superheroes, or maybe more so one of my childhood favorite superheroes, and I'm going to be talking about Gambit. More specifically, the Gambit 1993 and 1994 miniseries. This miniseries was Gambit's first solo outing after having been part of the X-Men for a few years at this point. Gambit being created in 1989 by Chris Claremont and Jim Lee. And Gambit at this point in Gambit's history, a lot is unknown about him. He's a very mysterious character. We know very little about him. It seems there had been an X-Men story maybe 2 years prior to this that kind of dove into a lot of his origin. I haven't read that one, so I will be going about it as if this miniseries is the only thing I've read, because it is. This Gambit miniseries is written by Howard Mackie and drawn by Lee Weeks. And then inked by Klaus Janson, Klaus Janson being notable as the inker for Frank Miller's run on Daredevil. And then Lee Weeks, you may know from his work on G.I. Joe, especially a lot of those covers. And then Howard Mackie is a well-known writer for comics. I just can't think of a single thing that he wrote off the top of my head. So that's our creative team. Howard Mackie writing, Lee Weeks penciling, Klaus Janson inking. And they do a pretty good job, I feel like. Like I said, Gambit's was one of my childhood favorite characters. I just thought he was cool, honestly. I thought his powers were cool. I thought he looked visually interesting. I really liked drawing Gambit. I still do, but Gambit's definitely a product of an era of comics that I don't typically like a lot, being the late 80s, early 90s. I like that era a lot for DC, not so much for Marvel, and I'm generally not all that into the X-Men comics. X-Men sometimes to me feels a little bit like nerd homework, but anyway, I digress. This Gambit series was written at a time when very little was known about Gambit's backstory and origin. I believe we had one main X-Men story where Gambit's origin kind of came to light, where we were introduced to the Guild of Thieves and the Guild of Assassins. But other than that, we knew very, very little about Gambit and the world that he comes from and his origins and all that. Gambit's a mutant. His abilities, which hopefully I haven't already said, are Gambit is able to hold an object, an inorganic object. He can't grab a guy and just start doing this. But Gambit grabs an inorganic object and he charges it with potential energy, and then he releases it, and the energy turns into kinetic energy and explodes. And most of the time, Gambit just uses that on playing cards because they're small, they're easy to charge up, and they're easy for him to throw, and he can carry a lot of them without being too conspicuous. But yeah, so that's kind of a basic of who Gambit is and why he's kind of notable. He was one of the most popular X-Men of the early 90s. And there's a reason for that. It's because he's cool. He looks cool. He's kind of mysterious. There's a level of intrigue with Gambit that had been missing from the X-Men comics ever since Wolverine got his own series and was kind of starting to become more, and we were learning more and more about him. But yeah, Honestly, this miniseries is I think really good. So let's just hop straight into her story, which today opens in New Orleans as a mysterious entity known as the Tithe Collector walks down the streets as a group of thieves plan to warn their guild of the Tithe Collector's presence. But they're murdered by a member of the Assassin's Guild, as the assassins want the gift of the Tithe Collector all to themselves. We then cut to New York, in the danger room of the X-Mansion, where we see that Gambit and Rogue are doing some training together and flirting a little bit as they go. But soon we see someone breaking into the Institute, unbeknownst to anyone but Gambit, who finds and catches the thief, recognizing him as an old friend from New Orleans. The two brothers step outside to catch up, and Henry tells Gambit that the assassins are acting up and have broken the peace. With the brother of Gambit's dead wife stirring the pot. This brother is also assumed dead by Gambit, because Gambit killed him. Fun fact. And after this lore drop goes down, Henry is assassinated. But he leaves Gambit with a clue that his wife, Belladonna, might be alive. And Gambit goes running off after the assassin. We then cut away to New Orleans, where we see that the thieves are typically gifted long life from the Tithe Master by the tasting of this mysterious substance called the elixir, which we see is made by a Parisian external named Candra. Gambit soon catches up to the assassins, and he starts blowing them up until they hide in a warehouse, where Gambit beats them all up before his wife's brother, Julian, comes out of the woodwork. And after being beat by Gambit, Julian tries to skewer himself before all the assassins teleport away, saying that they want both the gifts of power and the elixir from the Tithe Collector, and they plan to kill for it. Gambit then goes back to the mansion before he leaves for New Orleans, with Rogue sticking onto him for the journey. Gambit breaks into the leader of the Assassin Guild's house, only to find his wife is still alive, but only barely. And a group of assassins tries jumping Gambit, but he fights them off until Belladonna and Julian's father challenges Gambit to a duel, which Gambit also wins. But Marius, the father, has Gambit surrounded, so Rogue has to jump in, and her and Gambit bust heads. And Marius accuses Gambit of purposefully holding the elixir away from Belladonna, but Gambit doesn't actually seem to know about the elixir. And after Rogue and Gambit leave, Julian breaks into the house and attacks his father. As the Tithe Collector gives the elixir to the thieves, we see Gambit and Rogue busting in, disrupting the ceremony, with the Tithe Collector leaving. And shortly after, Belladonna is given a bed, as Gambit, his father, and a man named Pierre discuss the situation, and it soon comes to blows, but Pierre ultimately convinces Gambit's father to send him away. In the streets, we see Julian attack the Tithe Collector to try to steal the long life and the power, and we see that Pierre is working with the assassins, so he's betrayed the thieves. But soon the Tithe Collector teleports away. We also see that Gambit has taken Belladonna and Rogue to a secret house of his before he goes off in pursuit of the Tithe Collector, who we see has returned to Kendra. In a French casino, we see Gambit is trying to track down Kendra, but a group of guards confronts him and takes him to a parking garage, where they plan to kill him for snooping around. But Gambit takes down the guards before he suits up, now knowing that he is in the right place. Then the Tithe Collector comes by and sends Gambit straight to Kendra. Back in New Orleans, we see Rogue and a witch doctor kind of sitting with Belladonna, when all of a sudden Rogue gets the bright idea to use her powers to try and steal some of Belladonna's memories of Gambit. But she thinks better of it, but then the choice is taken out of her hands when Belladonna, she gives us the first sign of life we see her from her all series, by the way, and she grabs Rogue's arm, and Rogue is flooded by her memories. in Paris, Gambit wakes up in Kendra's hideout and he starts snooping around looking for the elixir. And Gambit and the Tithe Collector have a brief fight, which is interrupted by Kendra, who is an apparent old flame of Gambit's and a telekinetic. And she begins to monologue while hiding the elixir, we'll say, in her outfit. And Kendra tells Gambit that she is the originator of the two guilds and she is growing bored. So Kendra offers Gambit the elixir if he will kill his adopted father. But before Gambit makes a choice, Julian and the assassins come busting in, with Julian going straight for Kendra, only to be stopped by Gambit. The two fight, but Gambit's father is caught in the crossfire. Gambit takes down the rest of the assassins before Kendra throws Julian out of the building, and after telling Gambit that she will spare his life this time, Gambit pulls her in for a kiss before leaving, carrying out his father. And after Gambit leaves, Kendra realizes that Gambit has charmed her very effectively and stolen the elixir straight out of her hiding spot. So she calls for an all-out assault on Gambit. We then got back to New Orleans, where we see Gambit at a neutral ground church, where he confronts Julian once again, stealing the vial of elixir that the vial that typically would have given the assassins the power, I guess. And he takes it, and as Gambit's taking it, Julian pulls off his mask and shows Gambit his almost zombified state, which is the result of the elixir. And that is what's fueling Julian's tweaker-like dependency on the elixir. Gambit then brings Julian to his father and asks if he knew of the dangers of the elixir, and his father says yes. So Gambit has to decide if the risks are worth the reward to use on his wife. But he isn't given long to think about it, as the Tithe Collector and an army of thieves and assassins have arrived and are charging in. But Gambit charges up a giant statue, causing a massive explosion and allowing him to escape. At Gambit's house, we see that Rogue is very out of it as her mind enters the memories she stole from Belladonna. Back with Gambit, we see him thinking to himself, "I'm here, Belladonna. So quiet here in the Garden District. The reason I bought this house. Dreams of settling down someday. But this be too quiet. No dogs barking, no crickets chirping. They be seeking to keep me from my house, from my wife. It won't be happening. Vit, boys. Let's be getting this over with. I'm in a hurry. These days I've got to be admitting that assassin and thieves, they be looking a lot alike in the dark. More's the shame for my guild. More's the shame for my family, and more's the shame for me. For I once thought of you as brothers. This house, my house, I'll never look at it without thinking of the blood that has been spilled here tonight. Curse you, Kendra. Curse you for all of this. And now I gotta decide whether to be giving Bella this elixir, risk her being turned into that horror that Julian is. Maybe she better off dead. But no, there's a chance. I gotta take it. A chance to start over, maybe. But what about the rogue, Remy? How can you? Welcome home, thief. You didn't really expect to escape me, did you? Kendra's orders were that you suffer intensely. So, which would you like to see die first? Your former wife or your mutant girlfriend? Neither, lackey. No cards left, you impudent pup. If it's any solace, they wouldn't have helped you. This is a fight you never could have won. Now watch your life, your loves, Die, LeBeau. This time I will be the thief and steal the lives of your women before your very eyes. And then you'll be permitted to follow. Please, LeBeau. Your groveling will have no effect on the outcome of this situation. I am totally without pity. So try to hold on to the last shred of your dignity. Oh, I got a hold of my dignity. Among other things. What? My coat! What are you doing? Appears my situation be improving, eh? The pact, the elixir. You can't do this. I can, and I did. The pact is broken. Kendra never would have honored it again. And the elixir is mine. As Rogue begins to spiral, Gambit starts combining the vials until Julian jumps in and stabs the vial in Gambit's hand, causing it to break. So Gambit beats him up again, but spares his life this time. Then Julian tries attacking again, sneak attacking behind the back, before he is shot with a crossbow by his father. As Gambit sits there with his wife, Kendra comes in and offers the assassins both life and power if they kill Gambit. But Marius refuses, and so Kendra leaves, ending the old ways of the guilds. Gambit's father tells him to leave New Orleans and never return, because even though Gambit did the right thing, a lot of the thieves and assassins aren't going to see it that way. So for the sake of peace, Gambit should stay away. Back in Belladonna's bedroom, Gambit grabs the soaked sheet, the sheet soaked in the elixir, and he's able to wring a little bit of elixir into Belladonna's mouth. And she comes back to life, but she has no memory. And Gambit chooses to let her forget him, and he leaves Louisiana alone, walking away into that thick Louisiana fog. Alright, and that's our story. And I think it's a good one. I really like a lot of those Lee Weeks Gambit action scenes. I think they're somewhat repetitive, as you may or may not have seen. I feel like a lot of the times it's a bigger picture of Gambit like jumping and kicking and throwing a card, and then a couple of smaller panels with the action. But it's good art, and it's not the same pose every time. It just is sometimes a little repetitive looking. But that's really the only kind of issue I have with the art. It's very of its time in the 90s. It's very good 90s art. There's a lot of hatching and cross-hatching, and just a lot of lines, especially on the faces. But again, it's not a bad thing. I really like Gambit in this series. Naturally, it's his series. If you don't like him in it, it's kind of an L. But I think Howard Mackie does a really good job with Gambit. I like that he's kind of this somewhat like especially at the end of the story, he's this heroic rogue character, very Robin Hood-esque, very very noble while also being very kind of sleazy, kind of that Han Solo Robin Hood-esque character, even a little more morally gray than either of those two. But I really like Gambit in this story. I like that his main quest is just to get his wife back. I feel like it's a very human quest. It's not to save the world. It's not to beat a bad guy. It's not anything like that. Gambit is simply on this mission to try to save his wife. And I feel like that's just that's a nice story beat for Gambit's character. I feel like it makes sense, and I really like that at the end of the story, he saves his wife, but he also has to let her go. I think that's a really good, somewhat like a really good tragic hero, a really good, really heroic moment from Gambit, and I do like that a lot. Rogue is one of the other main, previously existing characters from the X-Men comic. He was in this miniseries. She's weird in it. Her and Gambit's relationship is always rocky, because obviously she can't touch him, and that's definitely a major holdup for her. And in this story, she steals some of his wife's memories, and like that. And what's really not going to help you kind of get over a little crush is stealing memories of somebody who is married to that person and inserting yourself into those memories. That ain't going to help. I'll be honest. But yeah, it's so Rogue in this story ends up playing more of the kind of more of a like lovesick supportive role in the story, even though she has super strength and flight at this point in the comic. It feels like she could do a little bit more than all that. She probably would have been real helpful in a couple of these fights, but I like that she's not in them from a story standpoint, though, because otherwise it would feel like, oh, why, I bought a Gambit comic, why am I reading a comic where Rogue is saving the day all the time? But anyway, overall, I think it's a really fun story. I think it's a good story. I think it's well written, well drawn. It's about Gambit, who I like. I think Gambit's more so. I think Gambit's more so cool than I would say. I think Gambit's cool more than I would say that I like him. Like, Gambit's. I don't know much about him. I really dig this miniseries. But yeah, I one thing that I do think is funny that definitely wouldn't have come up in the video. All of these covers, the Gambit logo is gigantic. Like, look at this. This one, half the cover is Gambit logo, is the word Gambit. And you think, oh, well, all of the X-Men miniseries of the 90s had that look going on about them. Oh, wait. Nope, there's issue 2. Issue 3, bang, added again. Issue 4, bang, 4 for 4. I just think it's kind of funny that the covers are mostly just devoted to the logo. I do like the covers for this series, though. Again, Lee Weeks draws probably all 4 of them. Definitely all of them, but number 1. There's no signature on number 1, so I don't know. But it looks like a Lee Weeks drawing of Gambit. But I think the series is good. At the end of the day, I enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun. I would definitely recommend it. I don't know if they ever collected it into a trade paperback. I don't even know like what you would find these regularly going for on like at a comic book store, because they've always been in my house, because I think my mom bought these, actually. It was either, my mom, because they're in an album. My mom bought these a long time ago, before I was born. So I don't actually know how much, like, what the value on them is. I don't know how easy they are to come by. But I would say that I do, at the end of the day, just recommend them. I think it's a fun series. I think it's good. I think Gambit's a fun character, and I think this is actually a decent hopping on point for him, if you know, like, a little bit about him. Like, if you've seen one of the X-Men cartoons and liked him, you'll be fine. But anyway, I think that's all I got on this one. So I'm just another guy named James. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.